We continue now at the top of Daf Amud Aleph and Meseches Bava Metzia. This is Bava Metzia Daf 29a. On the previous summit, the Gemara is discussing the machlokas in the Mishnah. The Mishnah is talking about a case where a person finds a lost object and sells it, and now he has to watch over the money till he returns the money to the original owner. And the question is whether or not the person who's watching over this money, is he chayiv b'achrayusan or not. Rabbi Akiva says he does not use the money, therefore he's not chayiv in achrayus. Rabbi Tarfon says he is able to use the money, and therefore he is chayiv b'achrayus. And the Gemara now says the whole machlokas between Rabbi Tarfon and Rabbi Akiva is elo kishenishtamish behen, is specifically when he uses them. Avalon nishtamish behen, but if he doesn't use them, im avdu pater. So then if the money gets lost, he is going to be pater. And Rashi explains, Ela mishum schar shimush mos. The point over here is, it's essentially because he can use the money, that is a certain kind of schar. That's almost like he's getting paid. Avol schar shmiras mitzvah, the name amigo de lo boy lemesa rifta la'anya. But in terms of the schar, that here he's doing a mitzvah, when you're doing a mitzvah, you also gain, because if you're doing one mitzvah, you don't have to do another mitzvah. In this case, essentially, because he's doing this mitzvah, he doesn't have to give bread to a poor person. Da'oseg b'mitzvah pater min ha-mitzvah, because if somebody's doing a mitzvah, he's pater from a mitzvah. Lo mechayvin. For that, we aren't mechayev him. And Rashi continues and explains, kishenishtamish, again, the Gemara said, this is only true, this machlokas is when he uses, lav dafka, it doesn't really mean he's using the money. Elamishum schar shimush kamar, just means it's as if he's getting paid wages because he's allowed to use the money. Mimnei shemuter lehishtamish ben, it simply means, since it's mutter to use the money, that's why we say this, but lo nishtamish behen, then he would be pater. Essentially what the Gemara is saying is that the machlokas is specifically in a situation where you can say that the person watching over the money is receiving a certain wage because he can use the money, and that wage that allows him to use the money, so then you have a machlokas to the extent, in terms of the extent of his obligation. But lo nishtamish ben, if there is no wage, so to speak, of using the money, so then he's not responsible if that money gets lost, and the Gemara will clarify as it continues. The Gemara continues and says, Leima tehave tiyufta de Rav Yosef. If this is true, we should say it's a refutation of Rav Yosef's opinion. The Itmar, because it was stated the following machlokas amoraim. In general, by a shomer aveda, by somebody that's watching over a lost object, Rabba Omar kashomer chinam. Rabba says somebody watching a lost object has the level of responsibility of a shomer chinam, meaning he's responsible only for negligence, but not for gneva v'aveda, not if it's stolen, not if it's lost, certainly not for onsim. You have the lowest level of obligation according to Rabba. And Rav Yosef says, no, it's a higher level, kashomer sacher. He's chayiv like a shomer sacher, meaning to say he's chayiv even for gneva v'aveda. And Rashi explains, Kashomer Chinam ve'eno chayev ella b'pshia, he's only going to be chayev if there's negligence. And Kashomer Sacher, if Yosef says like a Shomer Sacher, v'chayev b'gneva v'yaveda, and he's chayev in gneva v'yaveda, the Shomer Sacher mitzvah hu da'osek v'mitzvah pater min ha-mitzvah. The reason is, he's a Shomer Sacher because the Shomer schar mitzvah, essentially there's a schar mitzvah over here, because he's doing a mitzvah, and since he's doing a mitzvah, that's why he's a Shomer Sacher, because as we said, ha'osek v'mitzvah pater min ha-mitzvah. Now that he's watching over this lost item and doing one mitzvah, if a poor person would come and knock on his door and ask for bread, he wouldn't have to give bread. So that is essentially the wages that he is getting, according to Rav Yosef, and he is like a Shomer Sacher. Now the problem over here is that Rav Yosef is saying automatically a Shomer Aved is like a Shomer Sacher, and that's not what we just said above, because what we just said above was that only if he's able to use the money, then that's a schar, and then he's chayiv for Aveda, then he's chayiv if it's lost, then he's chayiv like a Shomer Sacher. Otherwise, lo nishtamish, if it's lo nishtamish, then he certainly will not be like a Shomer Sacher. And Rav Yosef would say that's not true. Rav Yosef would say even if you can't use the money, you're a shomer sacher because of the schar mitzvah. And so the Gemara continues, Amar lach Rav Yosef will say to you, B'gneva v'yaveda t'kol yama lo pligi. Actually, that's not what's going on. It could be that everybody agrees in terms of Gneva v'yaveda, automatically a shomer aveda, the chayev. He is chayev on Gneva v'yaveda, and that's not the machlokas tanoim in the Mishnah. Everybody agrees, at minimum, the person is certainly responsible for Gneva v'yaveda. Ki pligi ba'ons in the shoel. And the actual machlokas is when you have an ones, and the question is if he's at the level even of a shoel, and that's what Rabbi Tarfon is saying. Rabbi Tarfon savar sharu le Rabbanan l'shtamushe begavayu. Rabbi Tarfon is saying that the Rabbanan allow you to actually use the money. That's what it means, kishenishtamish behen. He has the ability to use the money. V'havale shoel alayu. He actually goes up a level. He's like a shoel. He's like a borrower, and therefore he's responsible even for onsim. That's actually what Rabbi Tarfon is saying. Rabbi Akiva savar lo sharu le Rabbanan l'shtamushe begavayu. And Rabbi Akiva says the Rabbanan did not permit him to use the money. Hilkach lo have shoel alayu. Therefore he's not a shoel on that money. And so that's what how Rav Yosef will have to interpret the machlokas in the Mishnah. So again, what we're saying is as follows. According to Rabba, the baseline of a Shomer Aveda he's a Shomer Chinam. And then the question in the Mishnah is, between Rabbi Tarfon and Rabbi Akiva, is if he's able to use the money, so maybe that's like a schar, maybe that should bring him up to the level of Shomer Sachar. That's what Rabbi Tarfon says. Rabbi Akiva says it does not bring him to the level of a Shomer Sachar. But now the Gemara is saying within Rav Yosef says no. The baseline is a Shomer Aveda because of the schar mitzvah is certainly like a Shomer Sachar. And the machlokas in the Mishnah is the fact that he can use the money, so does that raise him to the level of a shoel? But the Gemara continues, according to that, we still need to understand the language of the Mishnah. If so, lefikach da'amar Rabbi Akiva lamali. What does Rabbi Akiva mean when he says lefikach? Therefore, essentially Rabbi Akiva was saying, therefore, since he's not using it, he's not responsible for the onsim. And the Gemara explains the question. If you're going to say the machlokas is whether the person is chayiv in geneva v'aveda, so hainu de katani Rabbi Akiva, then it would make sense what Rabbi Akiva says. It says Rabbi Akiva says lo yishtamish ben, he can't use the money. Therefore, since he can't use the money, he's not chayiv in geneva v'aveda, because shomer sachar have a kid Rav Yosef, because one might have thought he's a shomer sachar, like Rav Yosef says. Uv geneva v'aveda mechayiv, and he is chayiv in geneva v'aveda. Kamash malon lefikach. That's what the therefore is teaching us, that we're saying that no, since he's not able to use it, therefore he's not chayiv in geneva v'aveda. Hashda da'amr lo yishtamish ben, meaning now that we're saying he can't use them, shomer sachar lo have. He's not a shomer sachar. V'lo mechayiv b'geneva v'aveda. It's not chayiv in geneva v'aveda. We can explain the lefikach if we were saying that the lefikach is going on the fact that he's not a shomer sachar. But if you're going to say that everybody agrees he's chayiv in geneva v'aveda, everybody agrees he's at least a shomer sachar. Ki pligi ba'onsin de shoel, and the machlokas is whether he's chayiv and owns him like a shoel. My lefikach to Rabbi Akiva. Why does it say therefore? Why does Rabbi Akiva use the word therefore? Hachim miboy lemisan should have said as follows. Rabbi Akiva omer lo yishtamish ben. Rabbi Akiva says he can't use them. V'ano yadan, and of course I'm going to know he's not a shoel. The came into lo yishtamish ben, since he can't use them. Lav shoel av, he's not a shoel. Ve'no chayiv b'achrayus, and he's certainly not chayiv b'achrayus in terms of onsin. Meaning it's very obvious that you're not going to be a shoel if you can't use it. When it comes to shomer sachar, it's not so obvious. It's possible by shomer sachar or shomer sachar because of the schar mitzvah. So therefore, you could say the lefikach. You could say you can't use them. Therefore, there is no schar over here. We're not counting schar mitzvah, and you're not a shomer sachar. That would make sense. But to say therefore you're not going to be chayiv and onsim, that's so obvious that you're not a shoel if you can't use it. So therefore, the Gemara says lefikach Rabbi Akiva lamali. Again, what's the purpose of the lefikach of Rabbi Akiva? And the Gemara answers mishum lefikach to Rabbi Tarfon. The Gemara says, well, we could just say that the lefikach of Rabbi Akiva is because Rabbi Tarfon's lefikach makes sense. So therefore, Rabbi Akiva also uses that same phraseology. He uses the term lefikach as well. And the Gemara now says, lefikach to Rabbi Tarfon lamali. So why do we need the lefikach of Rabbi Tarfon? So that's hachikamar. That's saying as follows: Kevan desharule rabbanon l'shtamusha begavayu. Since the rabbanon allow him to use it, command l'shtamish begavayu. Dummy, it's as if he did use it. V'chayiv b'achriyuson, and he's chayiv in achrayus. But the Gemara continues 1 second. Va'avdu katani, but the language still is that they were lost. It doesn't say anything about onsin. Rav Yosef is interpreting that the whole machlokas between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Tarfon is talking about onsin, but the language used in the Mishnah has to do with Aveda. It's not talking about onsin. We will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Tes Amud Beis.